The Pleasantness of a Religious Life by Matthew Henry. Thirdly, I call it a true pleasure, as there is science falsely so called, 1 Timothy 6:20, so there is pleasure falsely so called. One of the ancients distinguishes between pleasures that have some truth in them and pleasures that deceive us with a lie in their right hand. Some have said that the school of Epicurus, which is commonly branded and condemned for making pleasure man's chief good, did not mean sensual pleasure, but the pleasure of the mind. And we should be willing enough to admit it, but that the other principles of his philosophy were so atheistical and irreligious. But this we are sure of, that it is a true pleasure which religion secures to us. A pleasure that deserves the name and answers it to the full. It is a true pleasure for, one, it is real and not counterfeit. Carnal worldlings pretend a great satisfaction in the enjoyments of the world and the gratifications of sense. Soul, take thine ease, saith one, Luke 12:19. I have found me out substance, saith another, Hosea 12:8. Even the life of my hand, saith a third, Isaiah 57:10. I have seen the fire, saith the fourth, Isaiah 44:16. The wicked boasts of his heart's desire, but Solomon assures us not only that the end of that mirth is heaviness, but that even in laughter the heart is sorrowful, Proverbs 14:13. Both those that make a god of their belly and those that make a god of their money find such a constant pain and uneasiness attending their spiritual idolatries that their pleasure is but from the teeth outward. Discount at present disappointments, and fear of worse, ungoverned passions, which seldom are made less turbulent by the gratifications of the appetite, and above all, consciousness of guilt and dread of divine wrath. These give them the lie which, when they boast of their pleasures, with such allies are not to be boasted of. They would not be thought to be disappointed in that which they have chosen for their happiness, and therefore they seem to be pleased. They seem to be pleasant, when really their heart, if it knows its own wickedness, cannot but know its own bitterness, Proverbs 14:10. And many of the good things of this world, of which we said, these same shall comfort us, prove vexations to us. We are disappointed in that wherein we most promised ourselves satisfaction. If we say, our bed shall comfort us, perhaps it is not a bed to rest on, but a bed to toss on, as it was to poor Job, when wearisome nights were appointed to him. Nay, such strangers are we to real pleasure in the things of this life, and so oft do we deceive ourselves with that which is counterfeit, that we wish to live those days of life which we are told will be evil days, and those years of which we are assured that we shall say we have no pleasure in them, Ecclesiastes 12:1. But the pleasures of religion are solid, substantial pleasures, and not painted, gold and not gilded over. These sons of pleasure inherit substance, Proverbs 8:21. It is that which is the foundation firm, the superstructure strong, the consolations of God not few nor small, Job 15:11. While a vain and foolish world cause their eyes to fly upon that which is not, Proverbs 23:5. Worldly people pretend to the joy they have not, but godly people conceal the joy they have, as he did that had found the treasure hid in the field. They have, like their master, meat to eat of which the world knows not of, John 4:32. 2. It is rational and not brutish. It is the pleasure of the soul, not of sense. It is the peculiar pleasure of a man, not that which we have in common with the inferior creatures. The pleasures of religion are not those of the mere animal life, which arise from the gratifications of the senses of the body and its appetites. No, they affect the soul, that part of us by which we are allied to the world of spirits, that noble part of us, and therefore are to be called the true pleasures of man. The brute creatures have the same pleasures of sense that we have, and perhaps in some of them the senses are more exquisite, and consequently they have them in a much higher degree. Nor are their pleasures liable to the correctives of reason and conscience as ours are. Who live such merry lives as the Leviathan, who plays in the deep, or the birds that sing among the branches? Psalm 104, verse 12 and 26. But what are these to a man who, being taught more than the beasts of the earth, and made wiser than the fowls of heaven, Job 35, 10 and 11, and being dignified above the beasts, not so much by the powers of reason as by a capacity for religion, is certainly designed for enjoyments of a more excellent nature, for spiritual and heavenly delights. When God made man, he left him not to the enjoyments of the wide world with the other creatures, but enclosed for him a paradise, a garden of pleasure, so Eden signifies, where he should have delights proper for him, signified indeed by the pleasures of a garden, pleasant trees and their fruits, but really the delights of a soul which was a ray of divine light and a spark of divine fire newly breathed into him from above, and on which God's image and likeness was imprinted. And we never recover our felicity, which we lost by our first parents indulging the appetite of the body, till we come to the due relish of those pleasures which man has in common with the angels, and a due contempt of those which he has in common with the brutes. The pleasures of wisdom's ways may, at second hand, affect the body, and be an advantage to that. Hence it is said, Proverbs 3:8, to be health to the navel and marrow to the bones. But its residence is in the hidden man of the heart, 1 Peter 3:4. And its comforts delight the soul in the multitude of its thoughts, Psalm 94:19. It is pleasant to the soul and makes that like a watered garden. These are pleasures which a man, by the assistance of divine grace, may reason himself into, and not, as it is with sensual pleasures, reason himself out of. There is no pleasure separate from that of religion, which pretends to be an intellectual pleasure, but that of learning, and that of honor. But as to the pleasure of a proud man in his dignities, and the respects paid him, as Herod in the acclamations of the crowd, it doth but affect the fancy. It is vain glory. It is not glory. It is but the folly of him that receives the honor, fed by the folly of them that give it, so that it doth not deserve to be called a rational pleasure. It is a lust of the mind that is gratified by it, which is as much an instance of our degeneracy as any of the lusts of the flesh are. And as to the pleasure of a scholar, abstracted from religion, it is indeed rational and intellectual, but it is only the pleasure of the mind in knowing truth, and not in the enjoying good. Solomon, that had as much of this pleasure as ever any man had, and as nice a taste of it, yet hath assured us from his own experience that in much wisdom of this kind is much grief. And he that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow, Ecclesiastes 1:18. But the pleasures which a holy soul hath in knowing God, and in communion with him, are not only of a spiritual nature, but they are satisfying, they are filling to the soul, and make a happiness adequate to its best affections. 3. It is remaining, and not flashy and transitory. That is true pleasure, and deserves the name which will continue with us as a tree of life, and not wither as the green herb, which will not be as the light of a candle, which is soon burnt out, but as that of the sun, which is a faithful witness in heaven. We reckon that most valuable, which is most durable. The pleasures of sense are fading and perishing, as the world passeth away, 1 John 2:17, so do the lusts of it. That which at first pleaseth and satisfieth, after a while palls and surfeits, as the crackling of thorns under a pot, Ecclesiastes 7:6, which make a great blaze and a great noise for a little while, but soon end in soot and ashes. Such is the laughter of the fool. The end of his mirth is heaviness. Belshazzar's jollity is soon turned into the utmost consternation. The night of my pleasure hath he turned into fear to me, Isaiah 21:4. The pleasures of sin are said to be but for a season, Hebrews 11:25. For the end of that mirth is heaviness. As they have no consistence, so they have no continuance. But the pleasures of religion will abide. They wither not in winter, nor tarnish with time, nor doth age wrinkle their beauty. Frost nips them not, nor do storms blast them. They continue through the greatest opposition of events, and despise that time and chance which happens to all things under the sun, Ecclesiastes 9:1. Believers, when they are sorrowful, they are but as sorrowful, for they are always rejoicing. 2 Corinthians 6:10 and 2:14. Thanks be to God, who always causeth us to triumph. If an immortal soul make an eternal God its chief joy, what should hinder but that it should rejoice evermore? 1 Thessalonians 5:16. For as the treasure, so the pleasure is laid up there, where neither moth nor rust can corrupt, where nor thieves break through and steal. Christ's joy, which he gives to those that are his, is joy which no man taketh from him. John 16:22. For it is their heart that rejoiceth. They are the beginning of everlasting pleasures, the earnest and foretaste of them, so that they are, in effect, pleasures forevermore. So then, the great truth which I desire my heart and yours may be fully convinced of is this, that a holy, heavenly life spent in the service of God and in communion with him is, without doubt, the most pleasant and comfortable life any man can live in the world.